Welcome to CS507. I'm Dr. Chris Jamesa, and I will be your instructor, coach, um, guide as we go through this course. And so I'm just wanted to spend a few minutes and set some expectations for the course, what we're thinking about, a little bit of background on me. I have a PhD in computer science from Arizona State University. My focus was operating systems. I have a second PhD in education with a focus on instructional design for online learning. I have 5 master's degrees, computer science, project management, MBA, information security, and education. And my undergraduate degree was in computer science. I've been doing computers at various levels, from programming to leading programming teams to CIO positions to chief technical officer positions for over 25 years. While not doing that, and on the weekends and things, I've spent a lot of time working on different research topics, and I've written 115 books, the most recent being Data Mining and Analytics. And you can get a complete listing of the books if you surf Amazon and just search for my last name. I think Amazon gives me credit for 160 books, but I've really actually only written 115 of those. The others I worked on as an editor. So programming language books, computer security books, internet protocol books, database management books, kind of across the entire scheme. So a lot of books, but I've been working on it for quite a bit of time. And when I'm not in front of a computer, you can find me. I live in Arizona, so I have a ranch in Arizona with horses, and so you can find me sitting on a horse as opposed to sitting in front of a computer screen. In general, I like everybody to be proactive, so if you feel like you're having a problem, reach out and contact me. My contact information is on the classroom, and we'll get through it. So take a deep breath and relax. We're going to cover a lot of content in this course, but we'll do it together, and you'll do just great. So let's get started with a little bit about my expectations. I want to talk about expectations for graduate students, and there's a big difference between graduate students and undergraduate students with the degree of research you should be doing, the application of that research, how you synthesize it. So we'll talk about that a little bit, some rules that you can use and some tools that you can apply to help get along, the importance of critical thinking. And so as undergraduates, we got away with a little bit more. We could just kind of express an idea or an emotion. But as graduate students, you should really be applying more critical thinking to your thought, and maybe hold your breath and not say what you're thinking until you had a chance to think through what you're really going to say. We'll talk about some decision sciences issues, what's going to go on in the discussion threads, assignments, quizzes, and how you can get back to the feedback that I provide you. And finally, we'll wrap up with some keys for success. Then we'll jump into the week 1 content. So we'll get you started and up and running. So graduate student studies is about critical thinking and decision sciences. So we want to be applying research and looking at things that others have said, thinking about those things, and then sitting back and coming up with our own ideas and thoughts. And so we want to identify a problem, document the problem, look at the issues or concerns, but then start to say, okay, well, I can't be the first one to have this problem. Let's go back and see what others have said about it, and see if we can find some trends. And a lot of people thinking about it and expressing about it, and then we can weigh in with our opinion based on what we've read and what we've researched. So graduate studies is not about opinions without fact, beliefs, your feelings, or just guessing. But instead, we want to make sure that we're thinking about the problem, reflecting on it, and then making sound and reasoned conclusions based on the recommendations that we found throughout our studies. So we have a problem, research something related, research something identical, and see what others have said. Then weigh that information. Just because others have said it doesn't necessarily mean it's right or totally applicable to what you're trying to do. And so you'll want to reflect on that and then come up with your recommendations. Throughout the course, you'll be using a variety of textbooks, study articles, videos, audio messages that will convey course content. You're encouraged to read ahead. And a lot of times you can do that read ahead with just a quick scan of the material that's upcoming. As you find things that you don't know, drill down into them, Google them, research them, may find a YouTube video that explains them, but then you can do your full and complete read, maybe after a lecture, but you want to come to these presentations more prepared, and at least have a general working knowledge, and then you may need to drill deeper after that. And so you've got access to the SEU library that's got good databases that you can find information in. And so again, doing this last minute never seems to work. You'll run out of time, you'll just be stressed. And so you'll want to walk into that process being a little bit more prepared by researching early, starting it early. Everybody tends to procrastinate too long, and it truly impacts it. As a graduate student, you need to say, what am I going to be thinking about this week? What am I looking at? What are some related articles? Leverage the library as much as you can. And so once you've logged in, you can scroll down and find the digital library. This will bring you to the library databases page where you can start your research. And then from there, you'll find the articles that you can start to drill down in. In addition, as graduate students, we'll do a lot of writing. And the first couple of things that you write always seem like they're hard and take forever. That's because you're getting the formatting down. You're understanding, how do I start to structure things? Am I writing in first person, second person? So use the library research provides an API guide, and API takes practice, or APA takes practice. You need to be just looking at the feedback that I give you, but read through the guide or skim through the guide. It's available online. There's a link to it. And so I will be grading your APA as you submit your work, so you want to be familiar with at least the fundamentals. APA is large and complex. The good news is, for most papers, you only need the fundamentals. And so you want to make sure as you're doing your graduate studies that you're concise and clear, that you cite things correctly. And that's probably the biggest problem. You're never going to have a problem for having the wrong APA format for a figure caption. You might get a point or two deducted, but having a wrong citation can lead to other issues, either intentionally or unintentionally. So the goal is for you to understand the course requirements, my expectations, understand that you're applying critical thought in all that you do. And so with respect to, I wonder if I can do this. That will help. As some of the slides are getting just a little skewed. There are some good tools. Take advantage of the library, take advantage of the databases. Take advantage of Turnitin. I'll be using Turnitin to review your papers to make sure that it's not seen the paper before, so you're not using too much content from somebody else's paper, someone else's references. And so you can run your own papers through Turnitin as well. The sole goal is to make sure that there's no plagiarism, either intentional or unintentional. And unintentional plagiarism can be a result of using too large a quote. And so it's fine to cite other people's work, but you normally summarize that into your own key words and then make sure that you're referencing it. So plagiarism is defined as the stealing of words of others or stealing of the intent of the words and using them as your own. And so you can, as you're doing research, find the content and the message that the person's delivering, rewrite it in your own words, and cite that you got the content from them, and you'll be fine. And so all your papers will go through either SafeAssign or and which is part of the Turnitin process. Again, as you're doing your submissions, you'll see the ability to submit your papers within the course room, and it will then flow through that process. So things that they call it tools to acquire, but I call it skills to acquire. You want to make sure that you can use the library. So check it out and do a couple of searches early on. Leverage the writing skills that the university provides. Download the APA guidance and documentation. Use the tutorial. As you're working with your papers, make sure that as you're searching for things, start to make notes, and a lot of times I'll cut and paste the authors of the papers that I've not yet read into some kind of Word document or Notepad document that I can later go back, and when I'm done with my final paper, I can make sure that I have referred to all of them in my references and gotten the reference materials right. We talked about the fact that you'll want to be doing critical thinking throughout the course. Critical thinking consists of reasoning, evaluating, problem solving, decision making, analyzing. And so think of how you just reflect on different content, and that will be our critical thinking skills. But you want to start with a problem, look for solutions, see what other people have said, reflect on which ones work for you, and then start to write it up. So it is kind of goes full circle. The more you research, the more you know, the more you can analyze. And so it just works in a path for you. So we will have critical thinking assignments embedded in the course. And so your goal will be to have to reflect on the problem that we're discussing, and then critically find articles that are similar or on target, and apply your own critical thinking skills to analyze the information in the article and then apply it to your problem. Critical thinking assignments, again, you're gonna have a cover page, name and date and course number, have your content, and have your reference page. This all follows APA guidance and formats. So within the classroom, you'll be able to check your grades. So you'll click on the grades link. That'll bring up anything that I've graded, and you'll be able to see your grade and my feedback that kind of justifies what I was thinking when I assigned the grades. And so assessing the grades, you'll again see the assignment. All assignments, discussions, and quizzes are located in the grades. To view the grade details and the instructor comments about a specific assignment, click on the assignment yourself. So in the bottom case, you can see that the grade was 74.5. Click on the assignment and you'll see my feedback. And so again, accessing grades and the instructor feedback, click on the icon to see the rubric values. Every assignment has a rubric that goes along with it. Before you submit your assignment, kind of scan through the rubric yourself. Make sure you've covered all the key items. You'll see I'm going to be using the rubric as I assign the grades for the course. So if you've seen the rubric and gone through it, you'll be in better shape. So here's kind of an example of what a rubric's going to look like. It's going to, from left to right, have the different options I can select for the different categories. How did they do in APA? How did they do in critical thinking? How did they do in define a problem statement? So the rubric will differ for each assignment. Kind of the breakdowns will always be similar, but be familiar with the rubric because that's what I'm going to be grading for. So you can almost self-grade your assignment before you get started. And so after you download your assignment, you'll be able to see any markup comments that I've made, and you'll also be able to see kind of the comments on the right-hand side that correspond to my feedback. And so assignments that you've submitted that are not yet graded will show a yellow circle next to them as opposed to a score. So in this case, if you look at the assignment list, you'll see the two yellows. That just means that they're waiting in the instructor queue for me to grade them. And so again, take advantage of the tools that are available. You've got access to tutors, English as a second language tutors, APA tutors, the writing centers. So leverage these, and if you're going to leverage them, it just again points to your need to be proactive, because you can't wait till the last minute and expect to do tutoring and get your assignment in. So some of your keys to success: read all assignments and from the text and course materials freely and often. Feel free to contact your professor via my email. Use the library to find information on topics. And a lot of times, if you read the assignment and just go search the library immediately, you'll start just from the titles of things, starting to formulate a good approach and plan. Participate in the discussion threads at least 3 times per week, and attend the live sessions like this one that we'll be holding and collaborate. We didn't have one this week because I'd not yet been let into the system, so I just got into the system, so I'm posting this chat live. And so if you have any questions, please shoot me an email or post them in the discussion threads and I'll run across them. Okay, so now I wanted to just kind of jump into our discussion for the week. And so these slides come from our Computer Security Principles and Practice textbook by William Stallings and Laurie Brown, chapter 1 specifically. So we're going to dive into chapter 1. So chapter 1 provides an overview of computer security. We're going to begin with a discussion on what computer security means. And in essence, computer security deals with computer-related assets that are subject to a variety of threats for which various measures are taken to protect those assets. And so we've got databases, we've got documents, we've got files, we've got email folders, and those are all under threats. And so we want to look at different ways to secure them. And so accordingly, the next section of the chapter provides a brief overview of the categories of computer-related assets that you and I and system managers will need to protect and preserve. We're going to then walk through the remainder of the chapter to include such things as what assets do we want to protect. So that was what we'd say. Well, we got to protect our database. Our e-commerce site is exposed to the public. We have PCI credit card data that's out there. We have email. We have user databases. And so all these things are at risk of attack. And so how are those assets actually threatened? What can people do with them? And then what can we do to counter those threats? And so that'll be kind of a constant theme throughout this course is what are we trying to protect? What are we trying to protect it from? And how are we going to approach that threat? So when we deal with computer security and data and services, when we think of it services, now we have a lot of APIs, application program interfaces, that we put in front of our data that our applications call. They have access to a lot of things, and they're normally publicly facing, so others can use our code and call our code. So we need to protect not just our data, but also our services. The 3 concepts that will come into play is kind of well, NIST refers to it as the CIA triad: the confidentiality for C, integrity for I, and an availability. And so we want our data to be secure, but our data simultaneously has to be accessible. And so I worked as a chief technical officer and chief privacy officer for a healthcare company. We were taking electronic healthcare records and putting them on the web and also putting them in mobile devices. And in the United States, we have HIPAA security laws that protect what you can do and not do with healthcare data. And so I needed the data to be accessible to the mobile devices, to our cloud-based websites, but it was under threat and it needed to be secured. So we had a special data center that was called a HIPAA compliant data center, very secure, retinal scans and things to get into it. Within the data center, I encrypted all the disks. So if the disk was stolen, the computer was stolen, the disks were encrypted. We had databases on the disk, and so within the databases, I did what was called field level encryption of the database fields. So my developers couldn't just query the database and see people's healthcare records. It was harder for them to get to it. Then finally, when we were transferring the data to and from the cloud or mobile devices, we used HTTPS, which meant transport level security. So TSL and SSL for the encryption. So we had 3 levels of encryption. My main concern was that things were going to be very, very slow. And because we're encrypting it to disk, we're encrypting it to database, we're encrypting as we transmit it. But encryption has come a long ways. And it was actually not as slow as what I would have thought or been concerned about. It actually performed pretty well. So in the end, we ended up being in not a bad place despite all of our levels of encryption. And so some of the key things, again, our CIA triad, and you'll want to know the CIA triad. Confidentiality means preserving authorized restrictions on information access disclosure, including means of protecting personal privacy and proprietary information. Bottom line, confidentiality means it needs to be secure, we're going to keep it secure. Integrity means guarding against improper information modification, destruction, ensuring non-repudiation of authenticity. So confidentiality, we're going to keep it secure. Integrity means we're not going to allow people to change it in some way that puts the data at risk. But availability means it has to be available to users who need to get access to the data. So we call it a triangle. You can think of it as a 3-legged stool. You have to kind of balance confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Having the most secure data in the world that nobody can get to doesn't help as well. As we start to think about security breaches, we identify our data and kind of categorize our data into various levels of how would we be impacted if this data were breached. And kind of our categories are low, moderate, and high, where low is the loss could be expected to have a limited adverse effect on the organization, our operations, or individuals. So, okay, we got breached, it's not going to be the end of the world. Moderate, another term, says loss could be expected to have a serious adverse effect on the organizational operations and individuals. And then high, the loss could be expected to have a catastrophic. So low, yes, it happened, it's probably not going to be the end of the world, limited effect. Moderate, it's becoming more serious. It's going to have a serious adverse effect. And high, you can think of it as being very catastrophic. They got to credit card data. And so as we start to think about what is it that we need to secure and how are we going to secure it, we kind of looked at some different challenges. And so this slide's pretty full, but to start out, let's kind of walk through these. Computer security is not as simple as it might first appear to the novice. Put up a firewall, change your passwords. It ends up being all of those things on a constant basis, apply software patches. In developing a particular security mechanism or algorithm, one must always consider potential attacks. So we always say, what are we going to secure? What are the threats? How are we going to do it? Procedures used to provide particular services are often counterintuitive. And so we may say, we want to create a website, we know it's going to be attacked, so let's create a honeypot on the side of it that attracts the attackers, that allow us to detect their threat. And so they'll go to the honeypot first because it looks easier to violate. Honeypots filled with monitors that can tell us, hey, the site's under attack. Physical and logical placement needs to be determined. So again, I said I had the medical healthcare records in the cloud, kind of a logical place on mobile devices, but then I also had it physically in a HIPAA-compliant data center with encrypted databases. So we need to think about both the physical and the logical. Security mechanisms typically involve more than a particular algorithm or protocol, also require that participants be in possession of secret information that allow access. That information might be a username and password, might be biometric data, might be a retinal scan. And so depending on our level of risk and threat, will depend on how many modes of authentication do we require to get access to data. Hackers only need to provide a single weakness. So they just need to find the one thing that we left open where we have to protect everything. And so it's one of those things where we're securing, we're doing a great job. We're using firewalls, we're using intrusion detection, we're using multi-mode or dual mode authentication. We're doing everything right. We only have to do one thing wrong for the hackers to have success. Security is still often an afterthought. And so we put up a SQL database, and we secure it so our developers can get the data and read-write access. A lot of our users can only get to it and read access. We think we're getting pretty secure. We put up a website that people can place orders on, and we don't forget to check for SQL injections, which we'll talk about, which allow users to maliciously change the data or even download the data in the database, even though we'd only given them read access. Our application had read-write access. They leveraged a single hole. So often that's an afterthought. Once it happens, you think SQL injection with every database that you create. Security requires regular and constant monitoring. It's a 24/7 issue, and so if we can't monitor it, we have to have automated monitors that can step in and help. There's a natural tendency on the part of users and managers to perceive low benefit from a security investment right up until the time something happens. Then they'll say, why didn't you spend on this? Many users and even system security administrators view strong security as an impediment to the efficient use. Remember I said when I did healthcare records, I had encrypted disk, encrypted databases, encrypted data sends. And so a lot going on. I was very concerned about performance, but I was also very concerned about the security. So some terms that we'll be dealing with. An adversary is somebody who's trying to attack our system. An attack is any kind of malicious activity that is trying to get access to resources, deny resources. Countermeasures are the steps that we take to try to combat the threat. A risk is a measure of the extent to which an entity is threatened. And so everything has risk. We may not be able to resolve all risk. Our goal is to eliminate as many risks as we can and then mitigate the others. And so, and sometimes you can't get rid of all the risk, and so you have to mitigate them. So you get, for example, business can get a different kind of insurance. And so you can't eliminate all the risks that your key employees are safe, but you can insure against them being safe. So that helps mitigate a risk. Security policies is a set of criteria for the provision of security services. And so it's, here's what we're going to do. Here's our password policy. Here's our USB policy. Here's our database protection policy. A system resource is an asset that we're trying to protect, our databases, our email server. A threat is any circumstance or event that could be potentially or adversarially impact our organizational operations. Vulnerabilities are things that we leave open. We didn't eliminate the opportunity for SQL injection, for example. And so all these things start to play together. We have the owners who own the data. We have the threat agents, the hackers who want to attack the data. The owners value their assets, so do the hackers. The owners want fast access to the data, so too do the hackers. And so you have to start making arguments as to, yes, this may slow things down, but it's going to slow it down for everybody, and it's going to protect it. Countermeasures are the steps that we're going to take to fight any threats that come in, and everything really has different levels of risk. Different companies have different appetites for how much risk they're willing to take, but no one should be without a security plan. So the assets of a security system are hardware. We have hardware firewalls, we have software firewalls, we have intrusion detection systems, we have data that has different protections on it, and then we have our communication facilities. So we need to protect our networks, our internet service access and things. Vulnerabilities, again, are the potential holes that we haven't identified yet. Threats are going to be how people are taking action against those holes, and attacks are the actual attacks. There can be passive attacks. There are attempts to learn what's open, what ports are open on your network that I can start to listen to. Active are attempt to alter or download, get inside of data. An insider is somebody on one of your employees who's maybe disgruntled, getting ready to quit, and so they want to capture data or just peek at data while they're as part of their job. An outsider is an external attack. And so as we start to think of, we've got all these threats, we've got all these resources, and so our countermeasures are the steps we're going to take to mitigate the risk and try and protect those resources. And so we're going to prevent, we're going to detect, and worst case, we're going to then have to recover. And so as we make fixes, those may introduce opportunities for yet more vulnerabilities. So our goal is to minimize the residual level of risk to assets. So as we're moving forward, we always need to keep in mind, what are we going to protect? What are the risks to it? What are the threats to it? And how are we going to protect it? And so based on request for comment 4949, you can kind of Google that, and we've got some good definitions here. A threat or consequences is undisclosed or unauthorized disclosure. Somebody hacks a database and gives out everybody's credit cards. Deceptions are an event that may result in authorized entry, believing that something is true. And so somebody calls you up, says, I'm the government, I need your password. You believe them, you give them your password. You've been deceived. Disruption is then what happens when they start taking in your bank account data, or they change your password, and now you can't get access. And so we have threat consequences by type, threat actions that cause each consequences. And so when you get a moment, just kind of Google, it's called request for comment RFC 4949. So the assets of a computer system can be categorized as hardware, software, data, and communications, lines of networks. We kind of talked about that. And so we want to talk about these four categories and see how they can be attacked and how we can kind of move forward and better protect them. And so computer network assets, we have our hardware. It can be stolen. One way to mitigate that would be store things in the cloud, use cloud service providers like Amazon or Azure, because their data centers are going to be more protected than what we can do. Software, programs can be deleted, denying access to users. Unauthorized copies can be made. And so we want to make sure that have our software, have it licensed, we apply patches to it, good software practices. Data, we need our data available to users, but we want to lock it down so it's not available to hackers. And so data files can be deleted, database fields and records can be deleted. They can do queries that they shouldn't be allowed to. So it would make sense to say, who in this hospital, which patients have this particular disease? Well, you can think that I don't want to allow people to do that query. I don't want them to just be able to query to see who has what disease. But it's similarly, our security needs to say, I'm also not going to allow a query that says who doesn't have this disease, because I can get to the same data in multiple different ways. And so we need to be protecting our data from deletion, addition, but also just from general access. Our lines of communication, we used to say if you can touch it, you can hack it. And so if they can get connected to our network, they can start listening. They can use a packet sniffer. They can then suddenly see packets go by, have usernames and passwords. They can then start to attack resources using those usernames and passwords. So we need to protect our communication lines as much as we would our databases. there's different types of attacks. There's passive attacks, and so you can just kind of think of eavesdropping, monitoring transmissions. So I get access to a network, I roll up a packet sniffer, and I'm passively just waiting for something to go by. An active attack is I saw a username and password go by for the database. I'm now going to use it to start attacking the database. And so you can take a look at FIPS 200 and its minimum requirements for our federal information system. And so in the United States, we've said, okay, government systems are going to use this type of security. They have to have access controls. Access controls say who can get to what data, how. They need to have awareness and training, auditing and accounting. So we build our security policies, we implement our security plans. We then need to audit them to make sure that they are working. We need to be able to certify our solutions. We need to say, what's our configuration management? We've got databases, we've got applications, we've got software, we've got servers, we've got cloud things. How are we configuring and managing all of it? Do we have contingency plans for when things go wrong? How do we identify and authenticate users? Are we using multi-mode, dual-mode authentication? Are we using biometrics? When something happens, do we do an incident response that details what happened as well as our lessons learned? So when you get a chance, just Google FIPS 200. I'm going to skip the second page of FIPS 200. So the things that we want to include in our security design principles, we don't have unlimited budget, so economic things are a matter. We want to separate our privileges. We want to have different roles. So our administrators have one set of privileges, our users have a different set, our developers have a different set. We want to try to isolate things as much as we can, provide fail-safe defaults, give people the least amount of privilege that they need to do their job. Don't make everybody administrators. Try to encapsulate or pull things together so our database system is encapsulated within the specific set of servers. So think about layering. A lot of times when we talk about network layers, we'll talk about the OSI ISO network model. We've got our application, our presentation, our session layer, our transport layer, our internet protocol layer, our data link layer, and our physical layer. If we can layer security on each one of those layers, we'll then have a better approach to dealing with the different types of attacks that we can have. When attacks happen, they're going to exploit the vulnerabilities in our system. So maybe they passively scan all of our ports, they identify an open port, they identify the software or database that's listening to that port, then they can actively attack because we left the port open or we used a common port. We didn't change the database password on a common port, made the attack really easy. And so as we think of things, what are we trying to protect? What are the threats? How are we going to protect it? We have different levels of risk. We talked about the things that could be low, medium, and high risk. We wanted to put our most security on those things that are high value targets. But keep in mind that just because something seems like a low value target, some source code, those source code might have usernames and passwords embedded in them. And so we need to just have strong security across everything. But again, budgets aren't unlimited. So make your focus and your depth on the things that matter. And so this kind of talks about figure 1.5 is in your book, the attack tree for getting at internet banking information. And so I'm not going to, we've been going for a while right now, so I'm not going to dive into it too much. But we need to have a security strategy. That means security policies. You gotta change your passwords this often. Databases will have read-only access. We need to have security implementation. How are we going to implement that policy? How are we going to allow or require dual mode authentication? We need to evaluate, so that means auditing it, making sure that it's working. our lessons learned, and then our assurance steps after that. So there's a wide range of standards that can help us get started. Although businesses differ in type, a lot of their security requirements are the same. So one of the things I want you to do is take a look at NIST. It's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They've got a great set of frameworks that we can use. They've got frameworks for disaster recovery. They've got frameworks for security policy. You can think of a framework as just a document that's going to walk you through the process of securing your system or building a disaster recovery process. So just check out NIST first. We've listed several organizations here, but NIST has some of the best security guidelines. So in summary, we went over a lot from getting started in critical thinking, using the library and using the resource center and what APA is, to now jumping into our security discussion. And so we talked about security concepts. We went through different definitions. We talked about there's threats, there's attacks, there's assets. So what are we trying to protect? Who are we protecting it from? How are we going to protect it? And then we talked about some of the standards. We talked about security policies. We talked about FIPS 200. We talked about NIST. We talked about RFC 4646. And so you've got a lot to go back and take a look at. And so with that, next week we'll do a live session. Have a great week, and I will see you in the discussion threads.